Somebody was here. Somebody who knew they were dying. And instead of running, instead of saving their last calories for one more mile of road, they stopped. They pulled out a sharp edge, and they carved a message into this wall, not for themselves, for you. That symbol you're looking at? It means, do not go left. Contaminated water. 3 people dead. 3 scratches. 3 bodies. And if you didn't know how to read it, you'd walk straight into the same death zone that killed them. This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is the single most overlooked survival skill in every shit hits the fan preparedness manual ever written. Leaving markers. Not for you. For the people who come after you. Because here's the truth nobody wants to hear. In a real shit hits the fan collapse, whether it's a gry-down blackout, a chemical spill that poisons an entire watershed, a pandemic that empties cities, or a natural disaster that erases infrastructure, you are probably not the last person who will walk through that area. Someone will come after you. Maybe days later, maybe months, maybe years, and when they do, they will face the exact same death zone you faced. The same poisoned well, the same collapsed bridge, the same building full of black mold so thick it'll shred their lungs in 72 hours. The question is simple. Will they know? Or will they learn the hard way, the way that kills? If you don't know the science I'm about to show you, you won't last 48 hours. But worse than that, the people following your trail won't either. Today I'm going to teach you something that armies have used for centuries. Something that search and rescue teams, Antarctic explorers, and underground resistance movements have refined into a precise, life-saving system. How to leave markers that survive weather, time, and chaos so that future survivors can navigate a death zone without becoming part of it. This is the shit hits the fan legacy. Let's get into it. Anatomy of the problem, the science. Before I teach you how to mark a death zone, you need to understand why this is so hard. Because your first instinct, your gut reaction, is wrong. You're thinking, I'll just write a note. I'll spray paint a wall. I'll leave a sign. Sure, sounds easy. It's not. And I'm going to give you the rule of 3 core scientific reasons why leaving a lasting, readable marker in a post-shit hits the fan environment is one of the hardest communication challenges a human being can face. Reason 1. Environmental degradation. Let's start with physics. The moment you leave a marker, any marker, the environment starts destroying it. This is called weathering. Think of it like this. The Earth is a giant eraser and your marker is a pencil line. Rain dissolves water-soluble inks and paints. Ultraviolet radiation from the sun breaks down the chemical bonds and pigments. That's why a red sign fades to pink and then to nothing. Freeze-the-thaw cycles crack stone and concrete. In cold climates, water seeps into a car groove, freezes, expands by roughly 9% in volume, and physically splits the material apart. That carved warning you left? In 2 winters, it could be an unreadable crack. Humidity grows mold and lichen over surfaces. In tropical or subtropical death zones, biological growth can cover a painted symbol in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. Wind carries abrasive particles, sand, grit, ash. In a post-wildfire environment or a volcanic ashfall zone, wind erosion can sandblast a spray-painted wall clean in a single season. The takeaway: your marker has to survive a war with the planet itself. And the planet is undefeated on a long enough timeline, so your job is to choose materials and methods that buy maximum time. We'll get to exactly how. But first, reason 2. Cognitive load and ambiguity. Here's a problem most preppers never think about. Your marker has to be understood by a stranger, not your buddy, not your team. A complete stranger who might speak a different language, come from a different culture, and be operating under extreme stress with impaired cognitive function. Let me explain that last part in simple terms. When a human being is dehydrated, sleep-deprived, scared, or starving, which describes basically every survivor in a shit-hits-the-fan scenario, the brain's prefrontal cortex starts to shut down. That's the part of your brain responsible for complex reasoning, abstract thinking, and interpreting unfamiliar symbols. Studies from military survival schools, specifically the U.S. Navy's CIRE program, and research published in the journal Military Medicine show that after 48 hours of caloric deficit and sleep deprivation, a person's ability to solve simple logic puzzles drops by 40 to 60%. That means if your marker requires any amount of figuring out, it will fail. A survivor stumbling through a death zone with 900 calories in their system and 2 hours of broken sleep is not going to stop and decode your clever symbol system. They need instant recognition. They need to look at your marker and understand it the way you understand a stop sign without thinking. This is why random scratches, personal shorthand, or improvised codes are almost useless for legacy marking. Your system must be universal, simple, and unambiguous. One symbol, one meaning. No guessing. Reason 3. Time horizon mismatch. The third reason markers fail is the most brutal. You don't know when someone will find your marker. It could be tomorrow. It could be 5 years from now. And here's the cruel math. The methods that work best for short-term communication paper notes, chalk, charcoal are the ones that degrade fastest. And the methods that last the longest, deep stone carving, fired ceramic, metal engraving, require tools, energy, and time that a survivor in a death zone probably doesn't have. This is what scientists who study semiotics, the science of signs and meaning, call the time horizon mismatch. Your message needs to survive longer than your ability to maintain it. The United States Department of Energy actually faced this exact problem. In the 1990s, they commissioned a project called the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, WIPC, marker study. The question: how do you leave a warning at a nuclear waste site that will still be understood in 10,000 years? They brought together linguists, anthropologists, physicists, architects, and even science fiction writers. The conclusion? No single method is reliable alone. You need layered redundancy, multiple markers, using multiple methods at multiple scales. That's the same principle we're going to apply today, not for 10,000 years, but for the realistic shit hits the fan window, 1 month to 5 years. So let me summarize the problem before we solve it. You need to leave a marker that 1. Resists rain, sun, wind, ice, mold, and biological growth. 2. Can be instantly understood by a stressed, exhausted stranger who may not share your language. 3. Remains legible across a time window you cannot predict. And you need to do all of this with scavenged materials, limited tools, and whatever energy you have left after keeping yourself alive in a death zone. That's the challenge. Now let me show you exactly how to do it. Paces 1. The universal symbol, set what to say. Before you pick up a rock or a spray can, you need to answer the most important question: what message are you leaving? Because in a shit hits the fan death zone, there are only a limited number of things a future survivor needs to know. And every unnecessary symbol you add is noise that makes the critical ones harder to see. I've distilled this down to 7 core messages. These are based on real-world systems including FEMA's Urban Search and Rescue Marking System, the X-Code used after Hurricane Katrina, international hobo signs from the early 20th century, NATO tactical trail markers, and the Australian Bush Trail Blaze system. 7 messages. That's it. 7 messages that cover 90% of what a survivor needs to navigate a death zone alive. Message 1. Danger, do not enter. Symbol: a large X, 2 diagonal lines crossing. The oldest and most universally recognized hazard symbol in human history. Research in cross-cultural psychology, specifically work by Dr. DeLibble, Paul Ekman, and later studies on universal symbol recognition confirms that the X shape is interpreted as negation or prohibition across virtually every culture tested. Message 2. Safe road, go this direction. Symbol: an arrow, a straight line with a chevron point. Direction of travel: simple, unambiguous. Message 3. Water source. Symbol: ensemble, unsreku, symbol: a circle, representing a well, a pool, a container. If the water is safe, the circle is open. If the water is contaminated, the circle gets the X through it. Message 4. Shelter available. Symbol: a triangle, representing a roof, a basic shelter shape understood across cultures. Message 5. Number more of casualties, number more of survivors. Symbol: vertical tally marks, straight lines, 1 line per person, grouped below the relevant symbol. Under an X, that's how many died here. Under a triangle, that's how many people are sheltering. Message 6. DAT8. Symbol: a simple numerical date scratched or painted near the marker. Day and month, at minimum. This tells the finder how old the information is and whether the death zone conditions may have changed. Message 7. Biological hazard symbol: 3 crescents arranged in a triangular formation. The universal biohazard symbol, designed in 1966 by Charles Baldwin at Dow Chemical, specifically because it had no prior meaning in any culture and could not be confused with any existing symbol. Even if a survivor doesn't know the formal name, this shape is distinct enough to trigger caution. These 7 symbols are your entire vocabulary. Memorize them. Practice drawing them, because in a death zone, you won't have time to look them up. Now the next question is the one that separates amateurs from professionals. How do you physically make these markers so they last? That's phase 2, and it's where the real science begins. All right. You know the 7 symbols. You know what to say. Now we answer the harder question. What do you say it with? Because in a death zone, you don't have a hardware store. You don't have a paint aisle. You don't have laser engravers and stencil kits. You have rubble. You have trash. You have whatever is lying on the ground within 50 meters of where you're standing, and that's enough. Because every destroyed building, every abandoned vehicle, every pile of garbage in a post-shit-hits-the-fan landscape is a scrap tech supply depot if you know what to look for. I'm going to break this into 3 tiers. Think of these like gears on a bicycle. First gear is fast and easy but doesn't last long. Third gear takes more effort but goes the distance. You use all 3. That's the layered redundancy principle from the WIT study we talked about earlier. Fast markers lifespan, 1 to 30 days. These are your right now markers. You make them in under 60 seconds. They won't last forever. But they don't need to. They need to last long enough for the next group coming through days, maybe a couple of weeks. Material 1, Starcho. This is your #1 fast marker tool, and it's everywhere after a fire event. Any burned wood produces charcoal. House fires, campfires, wildfire zones. If you see blackened timber, you have a marking tool. Pick up a chunk about the size of your thumb. Not powder, you want a solid piece with a flat edge or a point. How to use it? Draw directly on concrete, stone, brick, or any light-colored hard surface. Charcoal is pure carbon. It bonds loosely to porous surfaces through a process called adsorption. That's when molecules stick to a surface without being absorbed into it. Think of it like dust sitting on a shelf. The problem: charcoal is water-soluble in practice. One hard rain washes it away. Even heavy dew degrades it. In dry climates, desert, death zones, arid plains, charcoal marks can last months. In wet climates, you might get a week, maybe less. The fix: if you have any kind of overhang, a doorway, a bridge, underpass, the inside of a culvert, put your charcoal marker there. Protected from direct rainfall, charcoal marks on concrete have been documented lasting over a year. Material 2, chalk and chalk. Substitutes real chalk. Calcium carbonate sticks might be in a school, a gym, a construction site, or a pool supply room. Grab it if you find it. But here's the scrap tech secret most people don't know. Drywall is chalk. Every interior wall in modern construction is made of gypsum board calcium sulfate dihydrate. That's a mineral cousin of chalk. Break a piece of drywall off a destroyed building, snap it so you get an edge. Use that edge to draw on concrete, asphalt, brick, or stone. It works. Not as bright white as pure chalk, but visible enough, and there is a lot of drywall in any collapsed structure. Lifespan: similar to charcoal, a few days to a few weeks depending on weather exposure. Material 3, GREC, oil, and lipids. Here's an unusual one: motor oil, cooking grease, Vaseline, lip balm, even animal fat. Any of these can be mixed with a pigment, charcoal powder, brick dust, rust to create a crude oil-based paint that resists water far better than dry charcoal alone. Why? Because oil is hydrophobic. It repels water. When you mix carbon particles into an oil base, you've essentially created the same thing as commercial oil paint. The oil carries the pigment into the pores of the surface and then seals it from moisture. How to do it? Crush charcoal into fine powder using 2 rocks. A flat rock on the bottom, a round rock on top. Grind it like you're grinding spices. You want powder, not chunks. Take a glob of grease. Motor oil works. Cooking oil works. Even the grease from inside a discarded fast food wrapper works in a pinch. Mix the charcoal powder into the grease using a stick or your finger. You want a thick paste, about the consistency of toothpaste. Apply it with your finger, a stick, or a scrap of cloth wrapped around a stick tip that's your brush. This crude oil paint can last 2 to 6 months on a protected surface. In a sheltered location inside a building, under a bridge, it can last over a year, and you just made it from trash. That's scrap tech. Durable markers lifespan: 1 month to 2 years. Now we step up. These methods take more time and effort, but the payoff is massive. These are the markers that will still be readable when the next wave of survivors comes through months later, maybe a full year or more. Mapton 1. Spray paint, the king of filed. Mapton Ray Paint, the ski reel. If you can find a can of spray paint, grab it. Guard it with your life. Spray paint is the single most effective field marking tool ever invented. There's a reason FEMA search and rescue teams use it. There's a reason military units use it. There's a reason gang territory markers, love them or hate them, last for years on concrete walls. Modern spray paint contains acrylic or alkyd resin suspended in a solvent with a propellant gas. When you spray it, the solvent evaporates and the resin hardens into a plastic-like film that bonds chemically to the surface. That film resists water. It resists UV light better than raw pigment. It resists abrasion. On concrete or brick, spray paint markers can last 2 to 5 years outdoors. In sheltered locations, much longer. Where to scavenge it? Hardware stores, auto body shops, art supply stores, construction sites, maintenance closets in commercial buildings, warehouses. Even some garages will have a half-used can sitting on a shelf. Pro tip on spray paint: color matters. In a death zone full of gray concrete, brown mud, and faded debris, the most visible colors are international orange, the same color used on the Golden Gate Bridge and flight recorders. It contrasts with virtually every natural background. Fluorescent yellow-green, the color used on high-visibility safety vests. The human eye is more sensitive to yellow-green wavelengths than any other color. This is physics. The peak sensitivity of the human eye's photopic vision is at approximately 555 nanometers, which is right in the yellow-green range. If you find orange or yellow-green spray paint, you've struck gold. Red is your third choice. Blue and black are worst. They blend into shadows and dark debris. MEPEN 2, scratch and score surface etching. No paint, no problem. Any hard, sharp object can etch a symbol into a softer surface. This is mechanical marking. You're physically removing material to create a visible groove. The key is contrast. When you scratch concrete, you expose the lighter interior beneath the weathered gray surface. That contrast is what makes the mark visible. Tools you can scavenge for scoring. A hardened steel nail. Find one in any collapsed structure. Look in door frames, floor joists, wooden pallets. Pull it out with pliers, a rock, or by prying with a flat piece of metal. A broken piece of ceramic. Here's a scrap tech gem. Ceramic from a toilet, a coffee mug, a floor tile, a spark plug insulator is extremely hard. On the Mohs hardness scale, most ceramics rate between 6 and 8. Concrete is about 3 to 5. Glass is about 5.5. That means a broken ceramic edge will scratch concrete, glass, and most metals easily. Grab a broken piece of porcelain from a shattered toilet tank. Seriously. That jagged edge is harder than a steel knife blade. It will carve into concrete like a pencil on paper, a piece of flint or quartz. Found in riverbeds, gravel roads, rocky outcrops, quartz is a 7 on the Mohs scale. It scratches almost everything. A piece of rebar. Found in any collapsed concrete structure. Rebar is steel rod, usually with ridged texture. The end of a piece of rebar, if broken or cut at an angle, creates a brutal scoring tool. Now here's the critical detail. Depth matters. A shallow scratch less than 1 millimeter deep will fill with dust, dirt, and biological growth within weeks. It disappears. You need to carve at least 2 to 3 millimeters deep into concrete or stone. That sounds like nothing. But on hard surfaces, it takes real effort. You'll need to go over the same line multiple times. Press hard. Use a rocking motion with your tool. Push forward with pressure, then drag back lightly to clear debris from the groove. For a single large X symbol about 30 centimeters across, expect to spend 10 to 15 minutes of focused carving on concrete. It's worth it. A groove that deep on a vertical concrete surface can remain legible for a decade or more. MEPTID 3. Grass is scoring the hidden technique. This one surprises people. Windows. Car windshields. Glass storefronts. Glass is everywhere in an urban death zone, and you can mark it permanently. Remember that ceramic piece I told you to grab? A sharp edge of porcelain or a piece of quartz will scratch glass permanently. The scratch creates a microfracture in the glass surface that cannot be weathered away by rain or wind. The only thing that destroys it is shattering the glass itself. A glass-scored marker on an intact window can last indefinitely. The downside, the scratch is subtle. It's visible mainly when light hits it at an angle, so you use this as a secondary marker, a backup to your primary painted or carved symbol. Score your symbol into a window near your main marker. If the paint fades or the carved wall crumbles, the glass scratch might still be there, catching light, whispering your warning to whoever looks closely enough. That's 3 Tier 2 methods: paint, score, glass. But we're not done, because the real legacy, the marker that outlasts you, outlasts the season, outlasts the year, that requires Tier 3. And Tier 3 is where we go deep. But before we get there, let me tell you something critical about placement. Because the best marker in the world, made with the best materials, carved 5 millimeters deep into solid granite, is absolutely worthless if nobody sees it, and this is where 90% of people get it wrong. Placement is not random. Placement is science, and it follows one simple rule borrowed directly from human factors, engineering the science of how people interact with environments. The rule is called the natural line of sight. When a human walks through an unfamiliar environment, especially under stress, their eyes follow a predictable pattern. Studies in wayfinding and environmental psychology, including research by Dr. Darroze, Reginald Gollage at UC Santa Barbara, show that people in movement primarily scan one straight ahead at eye level, between 1.4 and 1.7 meters above ground level for an average adult. 2 transition points, doorways, intersections, forks in a road, stairwells, bridge entries, any place where a decision must be made about direction. 3 choke points, narrow passages, gates, gaps in fences, tunnel entrances, places where you must pass through. If your marker is placed on the ground, on a ceiling, on the side of a wall that faces away from the approach direction, or in the middle of a featureless stretch of road with no decision point, it will be missed. Put your marker where the eyes already go. The ideal placement for a death zone legacy marker: on the wall immediately beside a doorway or corridor entrance, at eye level, on the right side. Why the right side? Because most humans, roughly 70 to 90% of the global population, are right-handed. Right-handed people have a slight but measurable tendency to look and turn right first when entering a space. This has been confirmed in shopping behavior studies, museum tracking studies, and military room-clearing doctrine. Put your marker where the majority of humans will naturally look first, at forks and intersections, on the surface directly facing the approach direction. Not on the side, not around the corner, on the face that a person walking toward the intersection will see before they have to choose a direction, at the entrance to the death zone itself, before they go in, not after. Your first marker should be the Do Not Enter X placed at the outermost boundary of the hazard area, visible from the approach path at eye level. One more placement rule. This one is from search and rescue field manuals. Redundancy of position. Never place just one marker at a decision point. Place at least 2 on different surfaces, using different methods if possible. 1 painted, 1 carved, 1 on the left wall, 1 on the right. 1 at eye level, 1 lower, at about knee height. Why? Because 1 might get destroyed. A wall collapses. A surface gets covered in ash. Graffiti obscures it. Water damage takes out the painted one, but the carved one survives. 2 markers. 2 methods. 2 chances for your message to reach the person who needs it. That's redundancy. That's how professionals do it. This is where most people stop thinking. They leave a charcoal mark, maybe some spray paint, and they move on. And that's fine for the first month. But what about month 6? What about year 2? What about the survivors who come through that same death zone long after the rain has washed your paint away and the wind has filled your scratches with dust? Those people deserve a warning too. Tier 3 is your long game, your actual legacy. The marks that will still be speaking your words when your bones have turned to dust. This takes more effort, more time, more calories. And in a shit-hits-the-fan survival situation, calories are currency. So you don't use Tier 3 for every marker. You use it for the critical ones. The entrance to the death zone. The location of the deadliest hazard. The message that absolutely, without question, cannot be allowed to disappear. Let's get into the methods. Metal is one of the most durable marking surfaces available in any post-collapse environment. And it's everywhere. Aluminum sheeting from HVAC ductwork. Tin from food cans flattened out. Steel from car body panels. Copper from electrical wiring and plumbing pipes hammered flat. Even the aluminum from a soda can, carefully cut open and flattened, gives you a marking surface roughly 15 by 20 centimeters. Here's why metal works. Metal doesn't absorb water the way concrete and wood do. It doesn't grow mold. It doesn't rot. Aluminum doesn't even rust. It forms a thin layer of aluminum oxide on its surface that actually protects the underlying metal from further corrosion. This is called passivation. That oxide layer is only about 4 nanometers thick, 4 billionths of a meter. But it's incredibly stable. It's why aluminum cans found in landfills are still legible after decades. Steel rusts? Yes. But even rusted steel retains engraved marks. The rust forms on the surface, but deep grooves persist underneath. A deeply stamped symbol on a steel plate can remain readable for 20 to 50 years, even with moderate rusting. How to engrave metal in the field? Step 1. Find your metal. Best sources in a death zone, abandoned vehicles, hood door panels, trunk lid, collapsed buildings, ductwork, flashing, gutters, commercial buildings, metal shelving, filing cabinets, electrical panel covers, food storage areas, large tin cans, lids. Step 2. Flatten it. If it's curved like a can or a pipe, cut it open with a sharp edge. A broken hacksaw blade, a sharp piece of hardened steel, or even repeated scoring with a quartz rock along the same line will eventually cut thin metal. Once cut open, place it on a hard, flat surface concrete, a flat rock, and hammer it flat with another rock. You want a roughly flat piece at least 15 centimeters in its smallest dimension. Step 3. Engrave. Use a hardened steel nail, a masonry nail. These are especially hard, made of case-hardened steel, a broken drill bit, or a sharp piece of ceramic. Place the tip against the metal surface. Strike the back end with a rock. One sharp blow per point. Move along your symbol outline, striking every few millimeters. This is called cold stamping or cold chiseling. You're using impact force to deform the metal. Each strike pushes a dent into the surface that is permanent. It cannot be erased by weathering because you physically changed the shape of the material. Step 4. Mount the plate. This is the step people forget. A flat piece of metal lying on the ground will be buried by debris, leaves, silt, or ash within months. You need to elevate and secure it. Best method: punch 2 holes near the top edge of the plate using your nail and rock. Thread wire through the holes, scavenged electrical wire, a bent nail, a strip of twisted metal. Hang the plate from a nail driven into a door frame, a tree branch at eye level, or a piece of rebar sticking out of rubble. Alternative: wedge the plate into a crack in a concrete wall. Bend the bottom edge at a 90-degree angle to create a foot, and lean it against the wall base where it will be visible but protected from being blown away. A metal plate marker, properly engraved and mounted in a sheltered location, can deliver your message for 10 to 50 years. That's a legacy. Method 2. Rock cairns. The ancient Sinal rock cairns are the oldest human-made navigational markers on Earth. They have been used for at least 5,000 years, likely much longer. The Inuit people of the Arctic built Inuit human-shaped stone figures to mark safe travel routes, food caches, and danger areas across featureless ice and tundra. Why do they work? Because stacked rocks do not occur naturally. This is a concept from anomaly detection in human perception. Your brain is constantly scanning the environment for patterns that don't fit. A pile of random rocks on a riverbed? Normal. 5 rocks deliberately stacked in a vertical column with the largest at the bottom and the smallest at the top? Unnatural. Your brain flags it immediately. It screams, "Someone was here." This is intentional. That instinctive recognition crosses every culture, every language, every era of human history. A cairn doesn't need to be translated, it just needs to be seen. How to build an effective marker cairn base stone? Find the flattest, heaviest stone available. Minimum size, roughly the width of 2 fists, side by side. This is your anchor. It should be heavy enough that wind won't topple the structure. Place it on solid ground, not on sand, not on loose gravel, not on a slope. Stacking order. Each stone should be smaller than the one below it. This creates a tapered profile that is both more stable, lower center of gravity, and more visually distinctive against the landscape. Minimum stack, 3 stones. That's the threshold for human perception to register it as intentional rather than accidental. 4 or 5 is better. More than 6 becomes unstable without mortar. Directional indicator. Here's the technique that most people miss. A simple stack says someone was here, but it doesn't say which direction to go or what the danger is. To add directional information, place a pointer stone at the base, a single elongated rock laid flat on the ground next to the cairn, pointing in the direction of the safe route or toward the hazard. Combining cairns with carved symbols. For maximum information density, carve your symbol, the X, the circle, the arrow into the flat face of one of the upper stones before you stack it. Use the ceramic or quartz scoring method from Tier 2. This way, anyone who approaches the cairn and examines it closely will find detailed information beyond just "someone was here." Cairn durability. A well-built cairn on stable ground can stand for decades to centuries. Gravity holds it together. There are no organic materials to rot, no paint to fade, no metal to rust. It's stone on stone. The most durable marker system available to a survivor with 0 tools. Method 3. Fyrode clay. Tables. The oldest the daughter storage on Lurit. This is my favorite method, and it's the one nobody thinks of. The Sumerians figured this out 5,000 years ago. They pressed symbols into wet clay using a reed stylus, then baked the tablets in a kiln. Those tablets still exist today. You can go see them in the British Museum. 5,000 years. Still readable. Still delivering their message. You can do the same thing with nothing but dirt, water, and fire. Here's the science. Clay is composed of phyllosilicate minerals, but forget that word. Think of it like this. Clay is made of tiny flat plates of mineral, stacked on top of each other like a deck of cards. When wet, these plates slide over each other. That's why wet clay is soft and moldable. When you heat clay above approximately 600 degrees Celsius, about 1,112 degrees Fahrenheit, those plates fuse together permanently. The water trapped between the layers escapes as steam, and the mineral structure locks into place. This is called sintering, and it's irreversible. Once fired, clay cannot be softened again by water. It becomes ceramic, the same material as a brick, a flower pot, or a toilet, and ceramic, as we already discussed, is incredibly hard and durable. How to make a clay tablet marker in the field. Step 1. Find clay. Clay soil is everywhere. Look for soil that is sticky when wet, smooth when rubbed between your fingers, and cracks when dry. It's most commonly found near riverbeds, lake shores, pond edges, and in areas where standing water has deposited fine sediment. If you grab a handful of wet soil and can roll it into a snake shape without it crumbling, you have usable clay. Step 2. Prepare the clay. Remove any stones, sticks, or large debris by hand. Knead it like bread dough for 2 to 3 minutes. This aligns the mineral plates and removes air pockets. Air pockets cause cracking during firing. A trapped air bubble expands when heated and can shatter the tablet. Step 3. Form the tablet. Flatten the clay into a slab roughly 2 centimeters thick, about the thickness of your thumb. Make it no larger than your hand. Larger tablets crack more easily during firing because heat doesn't distribute evenly. A palm-sized tablet is ideal. Smooth both faces with wet fingers. Step 4. Inscribe your symbols. While the clay is still wet, press your symbols into the surface. Use a stick, a nail, a piece of wire, or even the edge of a key. Press firmly to a depth of at least 3 to 4 millimeters. Make the lines wide at least 2 to 3 millimeters across. Thin lines close up during firing. Step 5. Dry the tablet. This is the step people rush, and it destroys the tablet. You must let the clay dry slowly before firing. If you put wet clay directly into a fire, the rapid steam expansion will blow it apart. It will literally explode. Set the tablet in a shaded, warm area. Allow it to air dry for at least 24 hours. In humid conditions, 48 hours. You'll know it's ready when the color lightens. The surface feels warm to the touch rather than cool. Wet clay feels cool due to evaporative cooling, and it sounds hollow when tapped lightly. Step 6. Fire the tablet. Build a fire. Let it burn down to a thick bed of coals. You need sustained heat, not flames. Flames are uneven and too hot on the surface while leaving the interior cool. Coals provide radiant heat that penetrates gradually. Place the dry tablet on the edge of the coal bed first. Let it warm for 10 minutes. Then carefully push it into the center of the coals. Bury it with additional coals on top. Maintain the fire for at least 2 hours. 3 is better. You need the tablet's interior to reach 600 degrees Celsius. A well-maintained hardwood coal bed reaches 700 to 900 degrees more than enough. Step 7. Cool slowly. Do not pull the tablet out of the fire and splash water on it. Thermal shock will crack it. Let the fire die naturally. Let the tablet cool in the ash bed for at least 4 to 6 hours overnight is ideal. When you pull it out, it will be a different material entirely. It will be hard, ring like a bell when tapped, and be completely waterproof. Inscribe a date near your symbol if you didn't already. Scratching a date into fired ceramic with a quartz stone is still possible. Remember, quartz is harder than ceramic on the Mohs scale. Step 8. Place the tablet. Wedge it into a wall crack at eye level. Place it inside a cairn. Seal it inside a glass jar or a waterproof container and leave it at the marker site. Bury it halfway into the ground at the base of a cairn so it won't be blown away but remains partially visible. A fired clay tablet, properly made, can survive centuries. We know this because thousands of them already have. You now have 3 tiers of marking methods. Tier 1 fast. Charcoal, chalk, crude oil paint. Days to weeks. Tier 2 durable, spray paint. Surface scoring, glass etching. Months to years. Tier 3 permanent, metal engraving, rock cairns. Fired clay tablets. Years to centuries. Layer them. Use all 3 at every critical marker point. Fast markers for the survivors coming tomorrow. Durable markers for the ones coming next season. Permanent markers for the ones coming next decade. That's how you build a shit-hits-the-fan legacy that actually works. But I'm not done with you yet. Because there's something I haven't told you. Something that ruins all of this work if you don't know about it. A mistake so common that even trained professionals make it. That's coming next. The survival masala. The secret that nobody talks about. Alright, listen carefully. Everything I just taught you, the 7 symbols, the 3 tiers, the placement science, the scrap tech materials, all of it is real. All of it works. But all of it can fail catastrophically if you make certain mistakes. And these aren't beginner mistakes. These are the mistakes that trained people make. Search and rescue veterans, military pathfinders, experienced hikers who've been blazing trails for decades. I'm going to give you 4 of them. 4 critical errors. Any one of them can turn your life-saving marker into a death sentence for the person who finds it. Mistake number 1, the false positive trap. This is the most dangerous mistake you can make. A false positive is when your marker tells the survivor something is safe, but it's not. Not anymore. Here's how it happens. You find a building, day 1 of the crisis. The structure is solid, roof intact, dry inside, no visible hazards. You mark it with a triangle shelter available. 6 months later, an aftershock cracks the foundation. The roof develops a leak. Standing water collects inside. Black mold Stachybotrys chartarum colonizes the damp drywall. This mold releases mycotoxins. Breathing those spores causes pulmonary hemorrhage, bleeding inside the lungs. It can kill an immunocompromised person in days. But your triangle is still on the wall outside. Still saying, shelterable. Still durable. Still inviting people in. Your marker just became a murder weapon. The fix, every shelter marker and water source marker must include a date. This is non-negotiable. Scratch the day and month right below the symbol. This tells the finder, this information was accurate on this date. Conditions may have changed since then. A triangle with 143 below it says, shelter was available on March 14th. A survivor finding it 8 months later knows to verify before trusting. But here's the pro-level addition that almost nobody does. Add a confidence decay indicator. This sounds complicated. It's not. Below your date, scratch a single horizontal line. That line means, I personally verified this. I was inside. I checked it. If you're marking something based on secondhand information, someone told you there's water down that road, but you didn't go yourself, do not add the line. The absence of the verification line tells a savvy survivor, this information is unconfirmed. 1 horizontal line, that's all it takes. But you have to be honest with it. If you didn't verify it yourself, don't add the line. Dishonesty in a death zone marker system kills people. Period. Mistake 2, the humidity destroyer. This is the mistake that catches people in warm, wet climates. In a death zone with relative humidity consistently above 70%, which includes the entire Gulf Coast of the United States, most of Florida, all of Central America, Southeast Asia, and large parts of Africa, your markers face an enemy that no amount of carving depth or paint quality can defeat on its own. Biological growth. Algae, moss, lichen, mold, biofilm. These organisms colonize surfaces with terrifying speed in humid environments. A painted symbol on an exterior concrete wall in a subtropical climate can be completely obscured by green algae growth in 4 to 8 weeks. Not faded, not partially covered, completely invisible under a living carpet of microorganisms. Even carved grooves fill with biological growth. The groove actually makes it worse. It creates a sheltered, moist microenvironment that organisms love. Your 3 mm deep carving becomes a tiny greenhouse for algae. The fix, location selection, becomes your primary defense. In high humidity, death zones, prioritize interior markers. Inside buildings, inside culverts, inside vehicles. Any enclosed space where direct moisture and sunlight don't reach simultaneously. Without both sunlight and moisture together, most algae and moss cannot establish. They need photosynthesis plus water. Remove either one, preferably sunlight, and growth rates drop dramatically. If you must mark an exterior surface in a humid environment, choose the north-facing wall in the northern hemisphere or the south-facing wall in the southern hemisphere. These walls receive the least direct sunlight throughout the year. Less sun means less warmth on the surface. Less warmth means slower evaporation, which sounds counterintuitive, but surfaces that dry slowly actually support less algae growth than surfaces that cycle between wet and warm repeatedly. The wet-warm cycle is what algae thrive on. Second fix, the oil seal method. Remember the crude oil paint from Tier 1? The charcoal and grease mixture? In humid environments, use it as a sealant over carved markers. Carve your symbol first deep, 3 to 5 millimeters. Then paint over the carved grooves with the oil-charcoal mixture. The oil fills the grooves and creates a hydrophobic barrier that resists moisture penetration. This slows biological colonization of the carved surface significantly. It's not permanent. You're buying months, not years. But in a humid death zone, months might be all you need. Mice take number 3, marker fatigue the boy whu cried wolf. This is a psychological error, not a material one, and it's deadly. If you mark everything as dangerous, your markers lose meaning. The human brain adapts to repeated stimuli through a process called habituation. Think of it like a car alarm going off every day on your street. After the 10th time, you stop looking. You stop caring. The alarm becomes background noise. The same thing happens with survival markers. If a survivor walks through a death zone and sees an X on every single wall on buildings that are clearly safe, on roads that are clearly passable, on water sources that are clearly clean, they will stop trusting your markers entirely, and then they'll walk right past the one marker that actually matters, the one marking the real hazard, the one that would have saved their life. The fix: be surgically precise with your danger markers. The X do not enter should be used only for genuine, verified life-threatening hazards, not for this building looks sketchy, not for I heard there might be a problem here, only for confirmed death zones. If an area is merely inconvenient or partially damaged but not lethal, don't mark it at all, or use a different indicator. A single vertical line means proceed with caution in several trail marking systems. It's a yellow light instead of a red light. Reserve the X for red. The rule of thumb: if you wouldn't bet your life that the hazard behind that X will kill someone, don't mark it with an X. That discipline is what separates a useful legacy system from noise. Mistake number 4. Forgetting the approach vector I touched on placement earlier. But this specific error is so common and so lethal that it deserves its own section. Every marker has a viewing angle. A symbol painted on the east face of a wall is invisible to someone approaching from the west. A cairn placed on the far side of a hill cannot be seen by someone climbing the near side. In a static environment, a city that's been destroyed and won't change traffic patterns are somewhat predictable. People approach from roads, highways, trails. But in a shit hits the fan scenario, traffic patterns are chaotic. Survivors don't follow roads. They cut through fields, climb over rubble, approach from unexpected directions. A refugee fleeing from the east might approach a death zone from a completely different angle than a patrol that came from the west last week. The fix: mark all approach vectors. At every critical hazard point, walk a full circle around the danger area. Identify every possible direction a person could approach from. Place a marker facing each approach direction. For a building with a biohazard inside, that might mean marking 4 walls north, south, east, and west faces. Yes, that's 4 markers instead of 1. Yes, that's more time and more materials. But here's the math. 4 markers take roughly 40 extra minutes of your time. That 40 minutes could save 4 lives over the next 5 years. Each marker has a cost the minutes at a potential return of 1 human life. That's the best exchange rate you will ever find in a death zone. If you lack time or materials for 4 full markers, prioritize the 2 most likely approach directions. Usually, this is the side facing the nearest road or trail, and the side facing the nearest visible landmark, a water tower, a bridge, a highway overpass. People navigate toward landmarks. They'll approach from those directions first. 2 markers minimum. 4 if you can. 0 blind spots is the goal. Let me tell you something that no survival manual will ever print. The hardest part of leaving markers isn't the carving. It isn't finding the right rock or mixing the right paint. It isn't even knowing the symbols. The hardest part is accepting what it means. When you stop moving through a death zone to carve a warning into a wall, you are admitting something. You're admitting that you might not make it, that someone else might walk this path after you, that your survival is not guaranteed. And you're choosing in that moment to spend your limited energy, your limited calories, your limited time on Earth, not on yourself, but on a stranger you will never meet. That is the most human thing you can do. Every cairn on a Scottish hillside, every blaze mark on an Appalachian tree, every X-Code spray tint on a flooded house in New Orleans after Katrina, every Inuit standing on the Arctic ice for 5,000 years. They all say the same thing. I was here. I saw the danger, and I chose to warn you. That is your shit hits the fan legacy. Not the gear you hoarded. Not the bunker you built. Not the weapons you carried. Your legacy is the message you left behind for someone who needed it. So here's your directive. Learn these symbols. Memorize the Legacy 7. Practice drawing them until you can do it in the dark, exhausted, with shaking hands. Carry a marking tool, a ceramic shard, a hardened nail, a piece of quartz. It weighs almost nothing. It takes up no space. And it might be the most important piece of survival equipment you ever carry. Practice the layered method. Fast, durable, permanent. 3 tiers. Every critical marker point. Mark honestly. Date everything. Verify what you can. Never add the confirmation line unless you checked it yourself. Be precise. Don't cry wolf. Reserve the X for real death zones. Discipline your markers. Cover all angles. Walk the perimeter. Mark every approach. Leave no blind spots. And above all, understand why you're doing this. You're not doing it because it's easy. You're doing it because someone did it for you once. Someone you never met. Someone who blazed a trail, stacked a cairn, painted an arrow. Someone who spent their energy on your survival instead of their own. You owe them. And the only way to pay that debt is to do the same for the person behind you. Knowledge is the only gear that doesn't weigh you down. Study the blueprint. Build the legacy. And stay out of the death zones.